For as long as there's been funny talking animals, I think people have wondered what they'd look like as humans. It's easy to think of this as only a thing that happens in fandom, but plenty of franchises have leaned into it for a variety of reasons, ranging from a quick gag to an entire marketing initiative. Hasbro wanted that Monster High money. And of course, this isn't specific to Western media either. Check out my pal Golden's video on Kaiju Girls if you want to be cursed with knowledge. And while the Sonic franchises has never really leaned into humanizations, especially with the core cast often existing alongside human characters, this doesn't mean it's never happened. There is a brief, albeit interesting history of Sonic being given human form. And today we'll be going over all the instances of this that I'm personally aware of. Hopefully this is everything and there isn't some super obscure instance I'm missing. Also, we're skipping any pre-Sonic 1 concept art. I'm well aware there's both humans and human-like designs in there who probably did influence Sonic's final design, but that feels like a different topic entirely. You may be expecting humanizing the Hedgehog to be exactly the type of things the Archie comics would do, especially with all of its multiverse hopping. But nah. Fleetway's Sonic the Comic would be the first to explore this concept in issue 17, branding itself the strangest Sonic story ever told. Fun fact, this is a claim it shares with issue 71 of the Archie Sonic comics. Coincidence? Probably. Both the script and the art for this story is done by Ed Hillier, who is more known under the pen name of Ilya. I hope I'm supposed to say that as a name and not just as the letters. While I'm not overtly familiar with his work, his book, The End of the Century Club, did win the 1997 UK Comic Art Award for Best Original Graphic Novel / One-Shot. It's always interesting to see what creators happen to pass through the Sonic comics. Our story begins very abruptly with Sonic about to be crushed by the Death Egg robot, and Tails in no position to help. Only for this scene to be quickly interrupted by Sonic, now a human boy waking from a dream. Sonic is extremely confused as to where he is, and upon seeing himself in the mirror, is in total disbelief. Before he can investigate the situation any further, he hears a voice calling for someone named Aaron, which he eventually figures out is him. He makes his way downstairs, only to discover that the person calling for him claims to be his mother. Sonic, or Aaron now, in complete shock, listens to his mother's request for him to sit down at the table for breakfast, and she attempts to serve him a hard-boiled egg, which he exclaims that he hates before rushing out of the kitchen. He happens upon a human version of Tails in danger, but when Sonic attempts to do a spin attack to rescue him, he finds that he can't and knocks himself out cold. When he awakens, he finds himself back in bed and seemingly restrained. Almost immediately after he wakes up, his mother arrives, once again trying to force him to eat the egg. He refuses, while she continually attempts to force the now putrid green yolk upon him, saying everything will seem so much better once he has it. Growing fed up, she yells, "Eat it, Spikeball!" Which is just enough for Sonic to fully realize that this isn't just not his mother, but is somehow Robotnik. This realization leads Sonic to awake from this nightmare, now in some sort of lab, finding that Robotnik was attempting to reprogram his and Tails' minds. Sonic immediately begins to go after the doctor, who makes his own hasty retreat. Sonic frees Tails from the machine, who doesn't remember anything from his time inside of it. Sonic says he would tell him, but he'd never believe him. So what are my thoughts on this? Starting with the Sonic design, I'm not a huge fan. It doesn't really read as Sonic as it could, but I suppose that's the point, because it does work in this story's favor. The main theme of this story is sort of this gaslighting horror, that the entire world, down to Sonic's own appearance, is to trick him into thinking he's not himself. I think Hillier's art is great here. It's very good at communicating what I think are meant to be complex emotions through very simplistic faces. Also, Hillier knows how to give his art a dreamlike quality, like the lighting in the hallway that casts a Sonic-shaped shadow behind Aaron, or how the imposter mother's face warps in more horrifying moments. The human Tails design, I don't really know what I think of it. From this panel, I kinda like it, but then the next panel is this really exaggerated expression, and I don't think I can fairly judge it. I think there's potential, maybe. Overall, not crazy about the design, but the story's execution I think is pretty good. One funny thing I want to point out about this story is that this human version of Sonic has both an issue of Sonic the Comic in his room as well as a Judge Dredd poster, which are both also seen in Sonic's room over 100 issues later. I just think that's funny that was kept consistent. A thing to consider when humanizing Sonic is that the Sonic series doesn't really have a set art style for how they depict humans. They've been intentionally cartoony, they've veered closer to realism, and they've also fallen in a medium between these styles. So I think it's very lucky that Yuji Uekawa has done art that could be considered to be a human Sonic. If you don't know who Uekawa is, you should. If there's a piece of 2D Sonic stock artwork you really like, high chance he drew it. And just so happens that he also drew artwork that has been interpreted to be a human Sonic before. Now, I've seen people argue about whether or not this is meant to be a human Sonic or a human character who just likes Sonic a whole lot, and regardless of how much digging I do, I can't find official confirmation either way. But based on the fact that this is a human character design inspired by Sonic by an official Sonic artist that many in the fandom have interpreted to be Sonic, I think it's fair to include it. I like this one a fair bit. The human design veers close to some of the artwork Uekawa provided for another Sega game, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. And I do think that's a pretty good style to design humanized versions of the Sonic cast with. It is a little techier than you'd expect Sonic to be. Why is there an antenna on his shoe? But maybe he just went through Adventure 2's story mode and has all the upgrades. This is what I think of when I imagine Knuckles.
Oh no!
Now there is some confusion about where this came from, and if you should technically call this official artwork. Fortunately, an article from 2001 on Sonic Stadium survives to this day with an explanation. It appears in an issue of the Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu, in promotion of Sonic Team appearing as a third-party developer at the Autumn 2001 Tokyo Game Show. I wanted to try to independently validate this, but it appears a lot of this magazine is just not readily available. We don't even have the cover to a lot of the issues from around this time. If I had to hazard a guess though, based on the fact that the Sonic Stadium article was posted July 17th, 2001, it probably appeared somewhere between issue 655 and issue 659, though I think 658 is the most likely, or 659 if they somehow got an early look at that issue. There is also another magazine, Famitsu DC, which was focused exclusively on the Dreamcast, rest in peace, but I didn't find much there either. Now, because it's artwork in promotion of Sonic Team appearing at an event, I'd assume it's fair to call it official artwork, but I guess we won't know for sure until someone tracks down the issue it appears in. I do prefer this design to the Fleetway one if I'm being honest, but it is a shame that nothing's really been done with it. Sonic Man is not Sonic. I feel that I should bring this up. I've talked about him before, but if I don't mention him, I feel that I'll get comments about it. Sonic Man is a character who appears in Sonic 06 who is personally inspired by Sonic, challenging both Silver and Sonic to races. He's had a bit of a resurgence in popularity this year, getting new official artwork on Sonic Channel, and Sega's April Fool's joke being them hiring a real Sonic Man as the franchise's ambassador. Does this helmet come in shadow? I want one. He makes small appearances in the Archie comics, now as a Super Sentai-styled superhero, based on Sonic. The cancelled issue 293 would have been focused on him as well as Sonic manified versions of Tails, Knuckles, Cream, and Amy. Again, definitely not human versions of these characters, but in fiction they would have been based on them. This is the main issue I'm sad about us never getting from Archie Sonic. This last one is not officially produced by Sega, but you'll see why I'm including it. World War Blue is a manga series and later a very short anime about two warring medieval kingdoms, the kingdoms of Segua and Ninteldo. Do you get it? Basically, the series takes the events of the console wars and depicts them in the context of medieval warfare, and all the characters are based on different video game IPs, such as the leader of the Ninteldo kingdom being a guy named Marcus, who is clearly Mario. Funnily enough, in the dub, he's voiced by Mike Pollock, so he's a little bit Eggman too. Our main character is Gear, named after the Sega console, and is based on Sonic. And if his super speed doesn't give that away, they just tell you by the end of the anime.
A warrior known as the Blue Sonic.
From a pure conceptual standpoint, I think that's a really cool idea. Like, there's a bit they do where they describe the downfall of Atari by depicting it as a kingdom that got so big, it had so many generals that it could not properly manage them, and that was what led to their downfall. A parallel to kind of whatever getting released on the Atari 2600 with no quality assurance. That's a really clever idea. Unfortunately, the show sucks. Oh my god, my plan was that I was going to watch it through twice. It's only 3 episodes, so I was going to watch the English dub and then go back and watch it in Japanese. And if I really liked what I was seeing, I would read a bit of the manga. About halfway through the second episode, I decided there is no way I could sit through this a second time. There's so much nudity in this show, and there's no coy censorship, they just show it. And that'd normally be whatever to me. But it caught me super off guard because this series was presented as a shonen to me, and it's done in a way where I feel that it either actively impedes the plot from having forward momentum, or it's completely tonally dissonant. I can't even put half this show on screen or describe it because I'd get demonetized or flagged. but every time they do something with the premise that I think is interesting or engages me, like the bit with Atari I described, it immediately follows it up with something like that. Even when ignoring that, while it introduces a lot of neat ideas up top, its pacing slows to a crawl and it doesn't even end at a satisfying point. They take over a fortress that basically ends up being a means to get Gear a power-up by killing his dad, who's based on Alex Kidd, by the way. I assume that's probably accurate to the manga, but honestly, if I knew I only had 3 episodes to work with, I would have at least made sure my Mario and Sonic XPs met. A version of Tails shows up as well, named Till. He dies at the beginning. He's basically Gear's motivation to fight against Nintendo. You might think that this would be Amy, but no, it's a Phantasy Star character. Which is fair, a lot of people do like Phantasy Star. You won't believe what they did to Opa Opa. This man is Tetris, he's a pervert, and I hate him. Let me shift to something more positive. In the English dub, Gear is voiced by Matt Shipman, and honestly, I could see him being a pretty decent Sonic.
Something I learned a long time ago is that nothing starts until you take action. And if you've got time to worry, then run.
Also, another thing is that the English dub is filled with references to different video games.
It's dangerous to go alone, so take this!
It's cute at first. It wears thin. But looking at Gear's design, it feels very plain. It's like the only defining trait they took was blue and slapped it on a generic protagonist. Which is funny because I feel that the Nintendo characters are given a lot more care when it comes to their designs. Like, I can tell who everyone is meant to be. But if I didn't know what this show was and you showed me Gear and said, that's Sonic, I'd say, he's definitely blue. Look, if y'all want me to do a deep dive on this manga, let me know. I don't really want to, but for all I know, maybe the manga's much better. And that's all the human versions of Sonic I found. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. It's honestly one I've thought about for quite some time. It was a bit harder to get this video out too, cause in my previous lore video I did say hopefully life doesn't get in the way, and oh, things certainly happened last week. But if you enjoyed this, feel free to hit like, comment, or subscribe. If you want to support the videos I make directly, you can do so over at patreon.com/hsquid. And shout out to my lovely patrons whose names are on screen, and a special shout out to my $5 patrons, Ned Rex, Nate DM990, and Diddly Doo. See y'all in the next video.